With all the discussion lately about Mexico's cartels, have you ever wondered just how powerful they really are? Like, could they overthrow Mexico's government? Welcome to Buried Origins. Today we'll try answering exactly that. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's do a little thought experiment here and assume that all of these cartels unify and attempt to overthrow the Mexican government. Now, in reality, this would almost certainly trigger an overwhelming US military response, which would prevent the fall of the government. But let's just ignore the US for a second and see if a unified cartel front could do the job. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing a unified cartel front is because Mexico's cartels are incredibly divided and extremely hostile towards each other, especially when it comes to territorial disputes. Most of the violence associated with cartels is from cartels fighting each other, not the police or the military. So it's a bit of a fantasy to assume that they could continue a civil war amongst each other while also fighting the government. So in our scenario, the cartels put together their formidable power and wage an all-out war against the government. Now, of course, we don't have an accurate account of their numbers, weapons, and trainings, so we have to do quite a bit of guesswork here. But some of these cartels have so much firepower that they resemble something more akin to a full-blown militia group rather than criminal organizations. Take this video here of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel showing off their firepower, for instance. They've got trucks that they've welded steel plate armor onto and mounted 50 caliber machine guns on top of, while also wielding 50 caliber sniper rifles. So not exactly the subtle pistols that you'd expect of a gang or mafia, but something closer in resemblance to a militia group. And these cartels are bold. That video was recorded 2 weeks after the Jalisco New Generation Cartel attempted to assassinate the police chief of the capital, Mexico City, and very nearly pulled it off, injuring him in the process. But beyond the propaganda videos and what little that the government forces have captured, it's really difficult to know exactly what type of weapons the cartel has and how many of them. We know that they have rocket-propelled grenade launchers, which Jalisco New Generation used to shoot down a Mexican military helicopter in 2015. But it's doubtful that they have vast stockpiles of these weapons and any advanced heat-seeking missiles that could seriously challenge the government's dominance in the sky. As well, a few anti-tank missile launchers have been captured, but it's very doubtful that they have stockpiles in the hundreds that they would need to negate the Mexican army's huge advantage in armored vehicles. The exception to those two things would be if the cartels have been watching events in Ukraine and have established their own production facilities to build drones capable of taking out helicopters and armored vehicles. If they did so at a mass scale, then they would potentially be able to negate two major advantages of the Mexican military. But regardless of the specifics about weapons, the cartels have some serious numbers that they could call up, with estimates ranging from 160,000 to 185,000 personnel working for all the cartels combined. Now that number includes a lot of low-ranking personnel like drivers and drug smugglers, and so the actual number of foot soldiers who take part in combat operations is probably much smaller. But compared to the Mexican military, the gap in strength really starts to become apparent. Including reserves in the National Guard, the Mexican government can call upon 600,000 soldiers, the vast majority of which will be better trained and equipped than almost all of the cartel's foot soldiers, few of which resemble the forces that you saw in the Jalisco New Generation's video, which were staged specifically to look strong. So the Mexican government would have at least a 4-to-1 advantage in manpower, although probably even greater, and that's ignoring police as well. So given the numerical and qualitative advantage of the Mexican government's forces, it's highly unlikely that a combined cartel force could face the Mexican military head-on and win. So they wouldn't be seizing any strategic objectives like cities, border crossings, or infrastructure. In reality, they'd probably have to fight a guerrilla war from the countryside, spreading their forces thin and conducting hit-and-run attacks rather than trying to capture and hold strategic territory, and so they wouldn't pose a serious threat to the Mexican government. But there are a few scenarios in which it's a bit more plausible. One would be if a combined cartel force launched a shock offensive and seized Mexico City before the Mexican military was able to mobilize. In this case, they could utilize the chaos to completely negate the Mexican government's ability to coordinate defense, potentially having the knock-on effect of completely demoralizing the Mexican military and causing them to capitulate. That seems incredibly unrealistic, but so did a group of a few hundred former inmates nearly overthrowing a government with a military of 200,000 battle-hardened soldiers, which is exactly what ISIS almost did back in 2014. Relying on shock and awe to almost cause the entire Iraqi army to surrender. But in reality, while the cartels have some serious firepower and capabilities, they don't actually pose a genuine threat to the Mexican government, and I hope you enjoyed seeing why. If you did, please like and subscribe. See ya.